Good morning and welcome, everyone. In the matter of the investigation into Empire District Electric Company doing business as Liberty regarding the February 2021 winter weather events as contemplated by docket number 21 GIMX 330 MIS, I call this hearing to order. My name is Susan Duffy. I am serving as chair of the Kansas Corporation Commission. I'm joined today by fellow commissioners Keene and French. This hearing today will address the unanimous settlement agreement filed on March 31st, 2023. This hearing is being broadcast live on YouTube and will be available for viewing at a later time. So let's begin. First, may I have entries of appearance? Empire.
Good morning, James G. Flaherty, Ottawa, Kansas, appearing on behalf of the Empire District Electric Company.
Thank you. Curb.
Yes, this is Todd Love, appearing on behalf of the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, otherwise known as CURB.
Thank you. KCC staff.
Yes, may it please the Commission, Thomas J. Connors and Walker Hendricks appear on behalf of the staff of the State Corporation Commission.
Thank you. And does staff have a recommendation regarding notice?
Yes, Your Honor, notice is proper in this case.
Are there any objections to notice? Hearing none, I find that notice is proper and the Commission has jurisdiction over this proceeding at this time and this place. First, there are a few preliminary matters, and we'll start with the Zoom. If any party encounters any technical issue, please ask to go off the record. We'll resolve the technical issue and then get back on the record. Second, witnesses participating by Zoom are asked to keep their microphones off until you are called to testify, at which point we will ask that you turn your cameras on. Third, if the commissioners need to deliberate, we will go off the record, enter a Zoom breakout room where we can't be seen or heard, and then we will return. Finally, as we're all participating at a distance, be especially careful to identify the pre-filed testimony and exhibits. We all have copies of this, so we should be able to follow along. Okay, next, is there a motion to admit pre-filed testimony?
Yes, Your Honor. Empire would request that the direct testimony and exhibits of Mr. Rush and Mr. Dole be referred into the record.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, they are admitted. Thank you. All right, are there any other preliminary matters, except I would like to introduce our court reporter, Denise Haas. She will be swearing our folks in today. So good morning, Denise. Glad to have you here.
Morning, thank you.
All right, not hearing any other preliminary matters, we'll begin with Empire's opening statement, followed by that of CURB and then staff. So, Mr. Flaherty, if you will begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'll ask Michelle to put that up on the screen. Good morning. The parties are here to present to the Commission for its review and approval a settlement on Liberty Empire's plan to minimize the financial impact to its customers relating to the extraordinary fuel and purchase power costs the utility incurred during Storm Uri back in February of 2021. Slide 2, please, Michelle. On November 23rd, 2022, Liberty Empire filed its proposed financial plan. It sought to recover the $10.81 million in deferred fuel and purchase power cost and related expenses incurred as a result of Storm Uri over a 13-year recovery period using a kilowatt-hour volumetric surcharge. Pursuant to the Commission's March 9th, 2021 order in the 21 303 docket, Liberty Empire used its current weighted average cost of capital rate of 8.8107% to calculate carrying charges on the deferred amount. The volumetric kilowatt hour surcharge was calculated by spreading the annual amortized cost by the total number of annual kilowatt hours approved in Liberty Empire's 2019 general rate case and used in its 2022 abbreviated rate case. The rate impact on the average residential customer who uses 1,000 kilowatt hours a month would be $7.32 per month. The plan provided for an annual true-up and a final true-up at the end of the 13-year period. Slide 3, please. Liberty Empire's financial plan was supported by the pre-filed testimony and exhibits of Mr. Rush and Mr. Dole, which have been referred into the record this morning. Mr. Rush quantified the fuel and purchase power cost and related expenses incurred by Liberty Empire during the winter event. He explained Liberty Empire's proposed financial plan to mitigate the impact on customers of the extraordinary expenses incurred during Storm Uri. Mr. Rush sponsored the proposed Winter Storm Uri rider tariff that was attached to his testimony. Mr. Dole, in his testimony, explained how the winter event affected Liberty Empire's procurement of fuel for its generation fleet and its efforts taken by Liberty Empire to mitigate fuel and purchase power costs during Storm Uri and then after Storm Uri. He went into detail about the protests that Liberty Empire filed at FERC with respect to the actions taken by Southern Star and the SPP resettlement process that Liberty Empire was involved in. I would note that Mr. Grady's testimony on behalf of staff also discusses these matters in his testimony. One other point on Mr. Dole's testimony and exhibits that I would highlight for the commission, and that is the Utilicast report that is an exhibit to his testimony. Utilicast was retained by Liberty Empire to conduct a comprehensive review of the utility's generation, transmission, and distribution operations and corporate communications during Winter Storm Uri. That review included internal process and procedures, emergency preparedness, fuel procurement, and other actions that would maximize production or minimize downtime. The report sets forth a number of recommendations, and those recommendations are outlined on pages 8 through 10 of the report. Slide 4, please, Michelle. Pursuant to the procedural schedule issued by the commission in this docket, all of the parties conducted and participated in a technical and settlement conference that resulted in the settlement that was filed with the commission on March 31st, 2023. The main terms of the settlement are set forth on the next several slides, and I want to walk you through those terms. The settlement is supported by all the parties in this docket and addresses all issues. The settlement states that the extraordinary fuel and purchase power cost and related expenses incurred by Liberty Empire were prudently incurred. For the period beginning when the extraordinary costs were first incurred and ending on May 31st, 2023, the parties agreed that Liberty Empire could include $920,698 in carrying cost in the regulatory asset to be recovered as part of the surcharge or rider. For the period between June 1st of 2023, when the surcharge or rider would begin if approved by the commission, and May 31st, 2036, when it would end, the parties agreed that the carrying charge rate would be reduced from Liberty Empire's weighted average cost of capital of 8.8107%, which was in its original financial plan, to a rate of 5.71%. The recovery period will be 13 years, beginning on June 1st, 2023, and ending May 31st, 2036. The lower carrying charge rate that was agreed to by the parties in the settlement reduces the total customer payments by $4.6 million. The settlement agreement also reduces the monthly impact to the average residential customer from $7.32 per month to $5.73 per month. Slide 5, please. Under the settlement agreement, the total annual amortized costs are divided by the total number of annual kilowatt hours approved in Liberty Empire's last rate case to come up with the kilowatt hour surcharge. The volumetric charge of just over a half penny per kilowatt hour will appear as a separate line item on customer bills. There is an annual true up and true up at the end of the 13-year period. Slide 16, please. In the event that Liberty Empire receives any funds as a result of profit disgorgement, civil suit relief, or market manipulations due to state and federal investigations, those funds will be passed on to customers through the company's ECA, ACA on an annual basis. Liberty Empire will work with staff and CURB to finalize the contents of the notice to customers, explaining the purpose of the surcharge by placing it into context. On this point, and in case customers take advantage of listening to this hearing, as the commission has heard in the other 6 Storm Uri cost recovery dockets, paying the $5.73 per month Storm Uri charge will be difficult for many of Empire's customers, but it is also important not to forget that keeping the power and heat on during the extended Storm Uri period, as instructed by this commission, avoided deaths and property damage that was experienced in other states. As the commission heard in those other cases, having to pay the monthly surcharge results in less costs than if customers would have lost power and heat and incurred thousands of dollars in water damage because of frozen and broken pipes in their homes. Under the settlement, the parties also agreed to enter into discussions regarding Liberty Empire implementing a gas hedging program to assist in mitigating natural gas price volatility, and for Liberty Empire to file an application for approval of said hedging program following those discussions. Finally, the parties agreed to discuss how placing Liberty Empire's wind projects in Kansas rates could mitigate fuel prices for Kansas customers. Ms. Charlotte Emery will be testifying this morning for Empire. Ms. Emery is the Senior Director of Rates and Regulatory Affairs for Liberty Utilities Central Region, which includes Liberty Empire. She led the settlement negotiations on behalf of Liberty Empire in this docket and is prepared to answer questions you might have with respect to the terms contained in the settlement. Although we do not plan to have Mr. Dole provide live testimony during this hearing, if necessary, he is available for commissioner questions as well. Also, at the conclusion of the hearing, if the commission has any legal questions regarding the settlement agreement, I would be happy to attempt to respond to those questions. Finally, Liberty Empire would like to formally thank the commission staff and CURB for their professionalism and their diligence in their efforts in this docket. This is the last of the 7 utility-specific Storm Uri cost recovery dockets. Having been involved in 5 of those 7 dockets, this commission and all of the gas and electric customers served by each of those utilities should be extremely thankful for all the work conducted by KCC staff and CURB in these dockets. Liberty Empire believes that the terms of the settlement are reasonable because they strike the proper balance of minimizing the financial impact on our customers on the one hand, while allowing Liberty Empire a reasonable opportunity to recover the costs that it incurred during Storm Uri and the costs it has and will incur to defer recovery of those costs in order to minimize the financial impact on its customers. On the other hand, Liberty Empire requests that the commission approve the unanimous settlement agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. We'll turn next to Curb. Mr. Love?
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. We're here today regarding the recovery of Empire's extraordinary costs incurred during Winter Storm Uri in February 2021. Quite some time has passed since the events we are discussing occurred, but after much hard work, the parties believe they resolved this docket. As you're aware, the parties have reached a unanimous settlement agreement in this docket, and while Curb never likes to see a ratepayers will be paying an additional charge, we feel that the unanimous settlement agreement is a fair and reasonable outcome of the extraordinary events and costs covered in this docket. Testimony in support of the unanimous settlement agreement has been filed by Curb witness Patrick Orr, in which he states his belief that the agreement will satisfy the three questions the commission considers when reviewing proposed unanimous settlement agreements. These being, is the agreement supported by substantial competent evidence? Curb believes that it is. Empire provided the testimony and accompanying exhibits of two witnesses who discussed Empire's efforts to comply with the governor and the commissioner's directives to maintain service during the winter weather event. There are approximately 100 data requests submitted in this docket, which provided information concerning Empire's operations during the winter's weather event. There have been communications between all the parties, and as mentioned by Mr. Flaherty, there was a full report from Utilicast, an independent third-party consultant, which reviewed the prudency of Empire's actions and overall conditions during the winter weather event. Second question addressed by the commission, does the agreement result in just and reasonable rates? Yes, Curb believes it does. If approved, the average monthly impact would be $5.73 over the course of a 13-year period. We do understand this is a long period, but in order to keep the amount low at about the average of $5.73, we needed to extend the period out. 13 years seemed to be a reasonable period of time. Further, the reduced carrying charges resulting from the negotiated settlement agreement will result in savings of Empire's Kansas ratepayers of approximately $4.6 million. Are the results in the agreement in the public interest? Yes, Curb believes they are. Mr. Orr will be available to answer any questions by the commission regarding his testimony. Curb asked the commission to approve the unanimous settlement agreement as agreed to by the parties. And I would like to reiterate, as Mr. Flaherty spoke earlier, we do appreciate everybody's cooperation in this docket. The negotiations went well, and I believe we came up with a reasonable agreement. We would simply ask the commission ultimately to approve that agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Love. We will next have Tommy Connors with commission staff. Please, Mr. Connors.
Yes, Your Honor. And just from the outset, I'm a little bit under the weather, so bear with me. My voice may go in and out, but I'll do my best. May it please the commission, good morning. I'm Thomas Shea Connors, appearing on behalf of staff of the Kansas Corporation Commission. To begin, staff supports the proposed unanimous settlement agreement filed on March 31st, 2023 between staff, Empire, and Curb. Staff filed direct testimony of Justin Grady in support of settlement agreement on behalf of KCC on April 6, 2023. Staff reviewed the financial plan presented by Empire to minimize the financial effects of Winter Storm Uri and the extraordinary purchase fuel and purchase power costs incurred in order to provide continued electric service to its Kansas customers. Specifically, staff reviewed the reasonableness and prudence of the extraordinary fuel and purchase power costs incurred by Empire during Winter Storm Uri. Staff reviewed the plan presented by Empire and modified by the settlement agreement and believes that it is a reasonable and balanced plan that will appropriately minimize the financial effects to its customers of the extraordinary natural gas and purchase power costs Empire incurred during Winter Storm Uri, while allowing Empire to maintain its financial integrity and recover the necessary carrying costs associated with these extraordinary costs through the date that these charges are fully recovered from customers. The agreement will allow customers to pay for the extraordinary costs associated with Winter Storm Uri over a period of 13 years. This would increase a typical residential customer bill by $5.73 per month. This is a reduction from Empire's originally requested plan which would have resulted in an average residential charge of $7.32 per month. Staff believes that this is a reasonable plan, given that it is less of a customer hardship than it would be if customers were to pay for these costs through the normal course of business via the energy cost adjustment, or what we like to call the ECA, which would call for paying for these costs over a 1-year period beginning in January 2022. That treatment would have resulted in an average residential bill increase of approximately $48.24 a month, which would have been a $41.74% increase. To summarize, staff believes that Empire acted prudently in operating its system to support regional reliability while managing its exposure to SPP-IM load to the extent it could. Empire's weatherization of its generation units and its actions to increase the level of fuel oil available in on-site storage was critical to avoiding even worse financial outcomes for customers. The parties agree that the $10,773,444 in extraordinary fuel and purchase power costs and the $33,513 in related expenses for a total of $10,806,957, exclusive of any carried charges incurred by Empire during the winter weather event, were prudently incurred by the utility, and that Empire shall be allowed to recover said costs pursuant to the terms contained in the agreement. In order to minimize the financial impact to Empire's customers of the extraordinary costs incurred as a result of the winter weather event, Empire shall extend its recovery of said costs, as I've mentioned before, over a 13-year period beginning on June 1st, 2023 and ending on May 31st, 2036. The volumetric charges for the extraordinary costs and associated carrying costs shall appear as a separate line item surcharge on customers' bills, similar to Winter Storm Uri cost recovery rider, as I mentioned before, beginning on June 1st, 2023. To sum it up, staff believes that the settlement agreement is supported by substantial competent evidence in the record as a whole, that it results in just and reasonable rates for Empire's customers, and that it is in the public interest. At this time, staff respectfully requests that the Commission approve the unanimous settlement agreement as filed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. That concludes our opening statements. We will follow the order of witnesses agreed to at the pre-hearing conference. Because this is a unanimous settlement, the parties have waived cross-examination, closing statements, and post-hearing briefs. Empire, will you please call your first witness, and will the court reporter please swear in your first witness, Ms. Emery?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Liberty Empire would call Charlotte T. Emery to the stand.
I'm not seeing Ms. Emery. Is she there?
Yes, she is there.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me, Ms. Emery?
Ms. Emery, you're on mute.
Yes, I sure can. Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give and the matter now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Can you please state your name and business address for the record?
Sure, it's Charlotte Emery, and my business address is 602 South Joplin Avenue, and that's in Joplin, Missouri.
Ms. Emery, who is your employer?
That would be Liberty Utility Service Corp.
And what is your position with that company?
Yes, I am the Senior Director of the Central Region. So I oversee the Rates and Regulatory Department for that region, who provides services for the Empire District Electric Company.
In that capacity, did you pre-file testimony in support of the settlement that is the subject matter of today's hearing?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you the questions that appear in your testimony, would your answers be the same today?
Yes, they would.
Your Honor, I'd ask that Ms. Emery's testimony in support of the settlement be referred into the record.
Thank you. Any objections? Hearing none, it's so admitted. Okay,
And I would tender her for questions from the commissioners. Thank you.
very good. And we will start with Commissioner King. Do you have questions of this witness?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Good morning, Ms. Henry.
Good morning, Commissioner.
A few questions from me, please. Help me out with the math here a bit, if you would. Over the 13-year recovery period that's contemplated by the unanimous settlement agreement, what is the total average residential customer impact? I know what it is per month, but if we do the little math, what does that come up to in your judgment?
Do you mind if I do a little bit of calculations real quick?
Please do.
Okay. I wish I could tell you I could do that in my head that fast, but I can't.
No, that's
Sure, I have $893.42.
okay. That's roughly what I came up with as well. So, and that's it. That's the impact per customer over the totality of the, what is it, 152 months period encompassed by those 13 years. And that would assume a usage of 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. Am I correct about that?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So if the usage were higher, then the impact could be a little higher too. Would that be correct?
Correct, or vice versa.
Yes, fair enough.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay. Let's turn the clock back to the time period when in February of 2021 during the Winter Storm Uri event. My first question there is what gas price mitigation policies, if any, did Liberty Empire have in place during the period of Winter Storm Uri?
So I can speak at a high level, Commissioner. Aaron Dole would be able to get into more specifics on it, but we operate underneath an advanced procurement plan for our procurement of gas prices. And we also have an energy risk management policy that we operate under. And we were in compliance with both of those documents at that time.
Okay, I appreciate that response, Ms. Emery. I would appreciate perhaps a more granular answer if I could have that from Mr. Dahl, if he could be sworn in and become a witness here this morning as well.
Yes, we can do that, Commissioner Keen. Ms. Haas, will you swear in Mr. Dahl? He is here.
Should we wait until we've gone through Ms. Emery?
I think it'll be helpful, Commissioner Fringe, to go ahead and swear him in, and then I could actually, given the Zoom format we have here, with the remainder of my questions, address them to either of these parties.
Commissioner Keen.
If that's acceptable.
Yes, are the nature of your questions primarily for Mr. Dahl then at this point?
Given, in fairness to Ms. Emery, and given the nature of her response, probably primarily so, but I don't want to exclude her testimony either.
Okay, all right. I'm going to allow Commissioner Keen to go ahead and question Mr. Dahl to keep the flow going. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Duffy. I appreciate that as well. Pardon me. Denise, please.
Mr. Dole, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give and the matter now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Good morning, Mr. Dahl.
Good morning, Commissioner.
I'll certainly grant Commissioner French and the chair their due here. This is a bit extraordinary to be kind of double teaming witnesses here, but I think in the interest of approaching some holistic answers to these questions is probably the best way to approach it. And I don't mean to do so with not due deference to you as well, Miss Emery. Mr. Dahl, let me go back to the question. Let me rephrase the question I asked of Miss Emery, and I appreciate your take on it as well. What gas price mitigation policies, if any, did Liberty Empire have in place during the period of Winter Storm Uri? And I would appreciate some level of granularity here, please.
Sure. So we have, as Charlotte mentioned, we have the Advanced Procurement Plan, the APP. That is our plan that we've been operating under. It's codified inside of our risk management policy. And that policy is governed by our Risk Management Oversight Committee, made up of a variety of individuals within the company. The policy at the time of Storm Uri was advanced procurement, either fixed price gas, physical gas, or beginning of the month baseload gas to the volumes of approximately 50% for the operating months in discrete winter and or summer seasons. So winter would be defined as December, January, February. Summer would be defined as June, July, August. And so our procurement for this particular period was almost exclusively, or was exclusively, beginning of the month, what they call IFERC gas, to the tune of 50% of expected burn for the month.
All right. So give me your assessment of the net effect of these policies in place at that time.
Sure. Probably the easiest question to ask is if you advance procured 50%, how much coverage did that give you? 50% of normalized burn, which is not running your entire natural gas fleet at the economic max for 24 hours a day, every single day of the month, is closer to about, for February 2021, is closer to about 25% of the total burn during this period. So if we were to take the gas daily spot prices on the Southern Star pipeline, which is the only pipeline that we have access to for our 2 combined cycles that don't have backup fuel, the advanced procurement plan saved us approximately $50 million by avoiding those purchases related to daily spot gas that we were able to base load with very low cost, we'll call it sub $3 gas at the beginning of the month.
I appreciate this very much. I think this is important to have this kind of information in the record, certainly in the public record, within the purview of what we're trying to do here in terms of the public access to what this evidentiary proceeding is carrying out here. So I appreciate very much the granularity of that. I think that's a very holistic answer, and I appreciate that. I'm going to ask the next question of you as well, Mr. Dole, and then I'll return to Ms. Emery. Moving forward then, in the post-Winter Storm Uri period that we're in now, as a lead up to the unanimous settlement agreement, what gas price mitigation policies has Liberty Empire implemented since then? Is there a delta? Is there a change in what your policies have been post-Uri?
So we review our advanced procurement plan on an annual basis. We go through that usually post-summer for any particular adjustments. Since Storm Uri, we have a couple changes. We have pushed up the percentages that we are procuring in advance. The target is still set at 50%, but we've been hedging closer to 60% of gas. Now that does come with a cost. If daily spot drops, like currently we're seeing sub $2 gas, then your mixture, your weighted average cost of gas is impacted by some of the forward gas you purchased, some of the beginning of the month gas that you purchased that can be at a higher price, and then the daily spot. We have a natural gas consultant every 2 weeks. We go through and review the technicals and fundamentals of the gas world for about 30 minutes. And that helps inform us of whether we can continue to operate in our policy. Our thesis has been color within the lines, but don't be afraid to move the lines. And so we have had to, during kind of the inflationary and deflationary markets, we've had to make some adjustments and either operate within a waiver of certain parameters of our risk management policy or operate within the construct of our risk management policy. And I would say, additionally, we have also been evaluating any open season options we have for natural gas storage. Because we're on a single pipeline, we have some limitations. There have been some open season storage. We have been fairly aggressive in our bids for those. We have not been successful at this point, but it's something that we continually pursue. And then as far as impact on natural gas, We also have increased the delivery of our backup fuel oil that allows some of our other natural gas fleets to be able to operate without any natural gas access for a period of up to 10 days.
Appreciate very much the detail and the candor of your response. It's very responsive to the question I'm asking. With your indulgence, Ms. Emery, I'm going to ask Mr. Dahl yet another question, and then I'll turn back to you. My last question, I think, would be this, Mr. Dahl, and I think you've probably answered it in part, but I'm looking at the slides that Mr. Flaherty provided to us, and I'm looking at the last page of the slides where the narrative is that explains different aspects of the unanimous settlement agreement. The next to last line from that, which I will just simply read into the record, it's easier. It says Liberty Empire staff and CURB agree to conduct discussions regarding Liberty Empire implementing a gas hedging program to assist in mitigating natural gas price volatility, and for Liberty Empire to file an application for approval of said gas hedging plan. Two questions having to do with that. One is how is what you anticipate this hedging program as it's developed at variance with what you've done in the past? And number two, what kind of timeline do you anticipate that will be adopted under?
Sure. The first question, and I want to be clear, our advanced procurement plan, we operate in 4 states, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, to try to get 4 different public service commissions and their staff to kind of all agree holistically on a natural gas hedging plan. Has proved to be a challenge in the past. The APP that we operated under Storm Uri had a strong preference toward physical forward purchases. Those are all eligible through the Kansas ECA. So Kansas retail customers did get the benefit of our plan that we had in place at the time. As we've struggled with some liquidity issues within the natural gas markets, we have had to pivot to a mixture of both financial and physical instruments. It's still a strong preference to go back to physical instruments, but it requires a certain amount of liquidity that at times has not been available. We have started discussions with Justin Grady. We had a really good hour-long, robust discussion the other day about, what policy we think like, what amount of participation he would want to have in that. And so it's something that we are eager to kick off with Kansas. I would say the struggle of implementing right now is the market has been so volatile lately, where unexpected changes, whether it's the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, has pushed up gas in traditional baseload seasons, in the spring and fall, where you don't expect $7 to $10 gas, and then therefore you have it. And then we just came out of a winter storm in December, and now we're in the February range. February, March, April, we're all seeing sub $2 gas. So to be able to kind of navigate that with a policy that has the rigidity that everybody can feel comfortable with, but gives us the room to kind of move around and maneuver and do what we see best fit, has been a little bit of a challenge. But Justin has been great to work with to understand the different aspects that we're up against, and it's something we're going to continue to pursue and hopefully try to wrap up by sometime this summer.
Great response, Mr. Dahl. I appreciate it very much. I guess it would be perhaps a slight British understatement to say that natural gas prices are extremely volatile.
Extremely volatile.
Would you have ever contemplated, even a year ago, post Winter Storm Uri, that you'd have gas prices in the range they're in today?
No, and I mean that is some things that I think people even missed during Uri is when February kicked off, gas was sub $3. After Uri, gas dropped below $3 again. And so, it was just this kind of blip within the month that increased the price to the levels that we had. And, if I were to design a hedging program and say, what am I price protecting? If somebody had said, well, you're price protecting, prices that can go $300 to $600, they'd say, well, you're kind of gaming your analysis right there. you're showing benefits that aren't really there because nobody's ever seen gas at these kinds of prices. Well, now we've got a pretty good stress test, and we, weren't on the highest pipeline for sure. So
Absolutely. A little insurance maybe doesn't hurt either, does it?
indeed.
Mr. Dahl, those are all the questions I have for you. I appreciate your indulgence, and I appreciate very much your responses. If I could turn back to you again, Ms. Emery, I appreciate as well your indulgence of my asking those questions of Mr. Dahl. If there's anything with respect to his responses in any of those you'd care to add, I'd be willing to hear that too.
I wish I had more to add for you, but I think Mr. Dole did a wonderful job there.
Very good. Let me conclude my questioning of the company witnesses with my last questions for you, if I could. With regard to Liberty Empire, well, let me preface that by one other thought. As Mr. Dahl indicated, I believe the Liberty Empire is subject to regulation in 4 states, of which Kansas is one. Is that correct?
That's correct. We also are subject to FERC for some transmission and formula rates as well.
Absolutely. Great point. Thank you for that. With respect to the other state regulation, though, and with respect to Winter Storm Uri, could you share with us how have these issues, as they affect Liberty Empire, how have these issues been resolved in Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas? What I'm asking you, in fact, is there an analogous form of settlement that has arisen from the deliberations in those other states?
Sure. So that's a good question. And if you indulge me, I'll kind of break it down one jurisdiction by each one. And I'll start with Missouri. It's our largest jurisdiction. So it gets about 88% roughly of our cost. Inside of that jurisdiction, there was a recently passed statute that allowed for us to securitize or opt to securitize those funds. The company ultimately decided to pursue that route for our Missouri customers. And so we filed a docket, was authorized that those costs were prudently incurred there. That particular docket is up on appeal with the Western District Court. And so we're still working through that legal process related to it. But one thing I would just note is that, the commission indicated that all the costs that we incurred during Storm Uri was prudent as far as that's concerned. We'll move next to Arkansas. And Arkansas, roughly, it varies, but it's somewhere between 3 to 4% of our load. And so inside of that jurisdiction, we're actually recovering Storm Uri costs through our fuel rider that we have there. A unique item that I would share with you in respect to Arkansas is that we actually had a very large over collection for the period leading up to Storm Uri. So we were able to take that very large over collection from our customers there to offset a lot of the fuel cost as a result of Storm Uri. And then last summer, we received a commission order that we could recover the remaining portion, that net portion, through the fuel clause over 4 years, utilizing our pre-tax WAC in that jurisdiction. And then moving over to Oklahoma, we actually just recently, I believe it became effective early 2023. We reached a settlement agreement there with the parties in the order, and the commission approved it. In that jurisdiction, we were going to be recovering it over 13 years through a separate rider as well. And the carrying cost on that going forward is approximately 4% on that one. And then related to our FERC customer, we passed that cost through, and I believe the city that utilizes, if my memory serves me correctly, the city that uses that generation formula rate, they were able to secure a loan at that point. They're paying back that loan. I don't know the specific terms on it.
Okay. Is that City Springfield by any chance?
It is not. No.
Okay.
No, it's City of Lockwood,
Okay.
Missouri.
Mr. Emery, those are all the questions I have for you. I appreciate very much the detailed answers that you've provided. I appreciate as well your indulgence of my questions. Thank you, Chair Duffy, for allowing me to kind of double team the company witnesses here for my cross-examination. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner King. Commissioner French, do you have questions of either witness of the company?
I do. Just a brief line of questioning. I think one line of questioning for each, actually, so it's convenient. We've got them both sworn in. I will start with Miss Emery. Good morning, Miss Emery.
Good morning.
Just briefly, I'd like maybe some additional context from the company on the carrying costs associated with the recovered amount. I don't know that you need to turn there, but I was looking at page 7 of your settlement testimony where you sort of lay it all out, the two components, that there's the initial $920,000 for the period between when the costs were incurred and when the costs will begin to be collected. And then there's the 5.71% carrying charge to apply to the 13-year recovery period. So first, to talk about the $920,698, it's my understanding that that was just sort of a negotiated amount. And I think in reading staff's testimony, they tried to be a little more granular and say that they thought that that was a reasonable reflection of the company's short-term financing costs during that time period. I guess I'd just ask your opinion of that. Is that something reasonably related to how the company viewed their costs during that time? Or do you just view it as a negotiated item? Is there anything more you could add for me on that?
Yeah, so I would say, characterizing it, we of course agree with the 920,698, and that there isn't a certain percentage associated with that. I will share that, the financing mechanism that we did, I'm going to call it the post or pre-collection period, is going to be different than what we ultimately end up financing it over the 13-year period.
Okay. Then let's talk very briefly about the 5.71%. Again, I think the characterization is that's a negotiated number. It is actually, I think it's identical to what another Kansas utility had. So I guess that indicates to me it's definitely negotiated. It's definitely not reflective of an exact calculation of Empire's costs. Maybe you could give me just a bit of thought process of why that number was acceptable to the company, in that, how do you think it reflects, what you expect borrowing costs to be over the next 13 years, and how do you think you can manage around it?
Sure. So while it definitely is a negotiated amount, if you look at the commission order that was issued, WAC was indicated in that, and that's how we did end up ultimately filing our original application, was that rate that's a little over 8.8%. However, just like all dockets and proceedings like this, you need to the company always takes into account negotiations and just a compromise of positions. And so over the time of it, we felt that the amount of 5.71 would be something that we could manage around, knowing that ultimately at the end of the day, we would like to keep our capital structure in alignment where it's going to be comprised, of debt and equity. So that's kind of how the company approached being able to think that 5.71% was reasonable.
I guess in my mind, I look at that number and I think, well, it's certainly lower than your weighted average cost of capital, but probably reflective of the volatility of of debt costs and not knowing where things are going over the next few years. But you can say from your perspective that seems in line with something you can manage around, and would not expect any particular windfall for the company, or you think it's reflective of your risk of carrying those costs over that time.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. That's helpful. I think that's all I have for you. If I could turn to Mr. Dahl. Hi, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Commissioner?
I'm well. I wanted to just have a brief discussion of one term in the settlement. I think it is, let's see, it's paragraph 16 of the settlement. And again, you don't need to turn there. It is simply, there is one sentence that says, the joint movements also agree to discuss how placing Liberty Empire's wind projects in rates could mitigate fuel prices. And you know, of course, I'm aware of some of Empire's issues in the Southwest Power Pool and how congestion has made it difficult for Empire to access resources throughout the region, or low-cost wholesale energy throughout the region, and even at times, I believe it's made it difficult for Empire to access its own region or own resources at times. Particularly, I think we've discussed during Winter Storm Elliott this last winter. So I'd kind of just like your perspective on how you think these resources could help in the future. And maybe one way to ask it is, were you able to access these resources during Elliott? Were these some that you had difficulty accessing, or were they some that helped you mitigate fuel costs during Elliott?
That's a great question. During Elliott, we were able to access and use the energy provided by these wind farms that have the full winter weather package on them to be able to operate at the temperatures that they had to operate at. Just for background for the remainder on the call, we did have, with one of our wind farms on the east side, we did have what's called a out of merit energy curtailment. And essentially what that means is they call it the UMI, and that means that they are going to drop your production down to zero because there is some sort of issue as far as deliverability. And so what Commissioner French is describing is what we have been actively pursuing with the Southwest Power Pool. Our Vice President of Transmission Planning, Nate Morris, is on the winter weather strike team to ensure that these sort of deliverability issues will be addressed in the future ITP. But essentially, for one of the wind farms, for one of the days, it was curtailed to zero. So it was unable, even though it had low cost energy to be able to provide to the grid, it was unable to get that energy out because of not because of the resource, but because of the constraints on the transmission system itself. The other two wind farms were able to produce and were able to receive a significant amount of SPP IM sales dollars that were then refunded back to the customers that have those in those rates.
Thank you. I think I know the answer to this. Well, these three resources, they were not online at the time of Uri yet, were they?
They were in varying stages of construction. But so there was energy produced by them during Uri, just not full nameplate energy.
And were whatever was online at that time, was it available during Uri?
Yes, whatever was online. Now, if you remember, Uri did not have the same kind of wind profile that Elliott did, which is why you saw the different loads and different temperatures. But they actually did perform above. I think it's in the Utilicast report. They actually performed above what the expectation would be for the wind they had at the time.
Is that reflective of the weather package you had on, or reflective of just what was going on weather-wise in their particular geographic area, or is there something you can attribute that to?
I imagine, and that's not 100% my bailiwick, but I imagine that is largely a composite of all of those. You know, without the winter weather package, because we did have other wind farms that do not have some of the cold weather package, or doesn't have it to the level that those wind farms do, that we're not able to perform. So I imagine it's part of it is just the geographic location. Because they're new, they come at a higher hub height, so they have, you know, they can access wind when maybe it's not as windy for some of the older wind farms.
I have one more question, but I think you actually already comprehensively answered it, but let me give you an opportunity if you want to add anything. And it's just, what are your activities, either at the Southwest Power Pool or operationally or future construction wise to ensure that those resources are available during extreme events in the future, to mitigate cost impacts to customers?
So yeah, as you know, we're active in the SPP working group status. So in particular, as I mentioned, Nate Morris, our Vice President of Transmission Planning, is working very closely with SPP staff from the winter weather strike team to go for the particular constraints that we saw during Storm Elliott, to identify those and try to get those captured in what would be the 2024 ITP assumptions. Those are still going through MOPSI and membership approval. So those will be discussed, I'm sure, at the next RSC and board of directors meeting. And, there'll be a variety of opinions about how to plan the system for particular weather, I'm sure. Aside from that, we are active participants in the IRATF, the FGSAG, and the REAL team. So a variety of groups that have representation from the commissions, the membership, and the RTO, which is really where we see the value is to navigate this, energy transition in the future of the next 20 to 30 years. We see it as a three-legged stool that requires, active participation and collaboration between all of them.
Thank you. I don't believe I have any more questions for either of the company witnesses. Thank you so much for both of your responses.
Thank you, Commissioner French. While we have witness Dahl right there, why don't I begin with you? You discussed the fuel oil situation, and that is part of your proactive approach. You are, if your fuel oil is full at your combined cycle operation, it will last 10 days. Was it full during Storm Uri?
So one correction, that our backup fuel, or our fuel oil tanks that you're referring to, they are at our Energy Center fleet, which is on the east side of our system, 2 arrows and 2 frames. Those are not the combined cycles on the west side of our system. The combined cycles are on the west side of our system. They do not have backup fuel. So we have firm delivery enough to run the 2 combined cycles at their economic max. And then any other gas unit, which would be State Line 1 or Energy Center 1, 2, 3, or 4, we have backup fuel oil on site. Energy Center has 10 days of backup fuel oil on site. State Line 1 has 7 days. Both were filled up to the brim before Storm Uri.
So that resource, then that offset for those entities outside of Kansas, they benefited from the fact that the fuel oil was there and mitigated some of the extraordinary costs. Is that correct?
When you say outside of Kansas, I want to make sure that I'm answering your question. What do you mean precisely when you say outside of Kansas?
Did Kansas benefit from the fact that you were filled to the brim at those locations, with those locations on the east side as opposed to the west side? Did the 9,688 customers benefit from that?
Yes, absolutely. So geographically, State Line 1, that does have backup fuel oil, 7 days. It generated all through the storm. It's on the west side. The Energy Center 1 through 4 have backup fuel. They're on the east side. But regardless, that is natural gas that we didn't have to procure, that would have come at considerable expense. As you read in my testimony, there was a lot of disruptions with the natural gas system, including low pressure. So you can imagine if the combined cycles had the pressure issues they did, where they had to push their generation levels down to their minimums just to try to maintain an adequate pressure and avoid the plant tripping. any additional generation that would have been on the pipe at that time would have complicated those efforts and likely would have led to some sort of outage from those facilities. So I would say Kansas customers benefited, all our customers benefited, and even the entire Southwest Power Pool benefited from having that amount of fuel oil on. And while I have the opportunity, the 7 days at State Line 1 and the 10 days at Energy Center, 7 days we used every bit of that. I think we came offline right toward the end of the storm, and we were right down to the very bottom of those tanks.
Okay, thank you. If I could continue on, as you brought up the issue related to the Southern Star and your woes with them and being before the SPP. So that did not resolve the way you wanted it to. Going forward, are you hopeful that another storm such as Uri would have a different outcome, or are you concerned that you will be, I think the word slighted, as you were with Storm Uri?
Yeah, so candidly, I do have concern. Just for some background, the pipeline issued what's called a standard OFO, an operational flow order. And, the intent of that is to make sure that everybody stays in balance, that we're having injections and withdrawals according to the system. And, to try to ensure that people stay in balance, a standard OFO has a penalty of either $5 per decatherm or 2.5 times the gas daily spot price, which at the prices we were seeing was pretty considerable. During the process or post-process of that, it was very clear to us that there were entities that were not staying in balance, and I can understand and we can even sympathize with some of those. We know that hospitals, if they overconsumed, that's just part of it. Penitentiaries, but we also saw industrials overconsuming, entities that had, transportation contracts with marketers. I believe in the FERC docket RP 21-618, they asked Southern Star for a list of who actually had violated the OFO. And so seeing that list, I think did frustrate us that while some of the entities may not have been able to control it, we feel like some of them did. And so the process of the OFO is to try to ensure the integrity of the pipeline. I think once Southern Star petitioned FERC for a waiver of OFO penalties, that became particularly problematic. I'm not sure that the incentive to stay in balance, if something were to occur again, is going to be there. And so that does give us, significant concern. Our location on the pipe is we're kind of the second to last one off. And so, the way the pipeline works is if you've got a precedent now that, OFOs can be waived because of something they deemed compliance in the aggregate, that's going to really jeopardize places like Empire District Electric that's second off, or city utilities that's kind of toward the end of the pipe. And so we do see that as problematic for the future.
Is this concern you have, is it shared by others, or do you feel that because that you are the only voice out there expressing this concern? That's one. And two, the OFO issue, was that for a very shortened time frame, or did the problem extend over 10, 12 days?
It was more during the particularly heightened part of the storm, so I would say it was a subset of the days.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I've heard individuals as vocal as we have been. I know we were largely on our own when it came to the protest of the OFO waivers. I think if you were to read the data requests that FERC request of Southern Star to show who stayed in balance and who didn't, the number of those that that were in compliance was not near the volume of the number of those that were out of compliance. And to manage that process, to be frank, is not easy. We received 300 gas cuts in a matter of a couple days. And so to process a gas cut, to try to back into a calculation of how much you're consuming, to pull down pipeline files, to see what your consumption is on an hourly basis, and to be able to move your units around is not easy. You're doing a lot of back end math, pushing stuff around, sleeping in shifts to try to stay in balance. But, we were proud that we were able to stay in balance and avoid what we thought would be a very costly penalty to our customers.
Okay. Thank you. This next question may be more for Ms. Emery. I don't know. And good morning to both of you. My mind was really fixed on what Commissioner French was talking about, and I didn't want to lose that train of thought, but good morning. In Mr. Rush's testimony on page 3, the question is about the timing of your filing to the commission to recover Winter Storm Uri costs. And I admit, I was concerned. Somebody has to be last, but we are at, 2 years past, and you all filed in November, definitely bringing up the rear. I don't know if in your Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, that you also were the last to file and the last to be dealt with, but higher costs are going to be charged to customers on the carrying charge during that time frame of Storm Uri to May 31st. And your statement, or Mr. Rush's statement on page 3, says that there's 2 primary reasons. One, you were waiting on these protests and disputes that you filed, and hoping that if you were able to recover costs, then they could be included in the agreement that would be put into place for the customer. Secondly, a people resource constraint, which I understand, but did you really, other than the people resource constraint, and I understand out of your 215,000 customers, there are less than 10,000 in Kansas. Very, very small percentage. So was it really you were waiting for the decision from SPP on these issues? That's why you filed so late, Ms. Emery?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would say it is both of those. Those are factual statements. As far as timing, maybe it helps a little bit in regards to the resettlements. So the company did receive about $10 million of resettlement credits. I think they were recorded somewhere around December of 21. So that did go in to offset the cost for that. That's at a total company level. But I will also just, in full transparency, when you have 5 of these types of dockets to try to process, that was unexpected. We don't necessarily staff at our company to be able to process all of these types of unexpected dockets, and it took a lot of resources to do that. But we got in as quickly as we possibly could, and it is I recognize and can appreciate there being additional cost for our customers in Kansas as being the last, but they also, I think, benefited in a way from the fact that we were able to put forth a good proceeding and evidence in regards to how we went about supporting and acting in our customers' best faith along the way, to ensure that they were able to have the heat that they needed to keep themselves warm during this event. Not all utilities could sit and tell their commissions that they kept the lights on to the best of their ability during that event.
Yes, and I understand that, but of the $10 million that you received because of resettlement issues, how much was apportioned to the Kansas customers?
Yeah, I believe it's the percentage, it's around that 5%. It was around $480,000 for Kansas customers.
So I wonder if I mean, that would have come anyway, but if you balance out the increased costs because of using the higher carrying costs, most of those funds were eaten up. Would you agree?
I haven't done that analysis to go in and see, if we had proceeded to file perhaps earlier without those resettlement funds, what kind of impact it would have had on those carrying costs. I'm happy to put together an analysis for you if that would be beneficial.
Would be interesting to see because our proportion would be so small, and even still, I mean, we all must remember that if there's any nefarious activity, disengorgement, whatever that is discovered through investigations with our Attorney General or at the federal level, all of these dockets will need to be revisited and the funds reimbursed to customers to lower the costs that they will spend, they will pay over the next 13 years. I almost thought we were done, and then I was reminded, no, Empire has not come in yet. So, okay. Let me turn to another part of the testimony of Mr. Rush, and that's on page 5, where he talks about deferred costs. And on line 18, he references a schedule, GMR1, and it serves as the company's compliance report, which details the extent of the extraordinary costs incurred now that all deferred costs have been accumulated and recorded. And then when I read further in his testimony on page 9, I believe I'm on line 9. However, the company anticipates incurring additional carrying costs associated with procuring and purchasing natural gas and wholesale energy. Further, the company will record any applicable legal fees and consulting costs as they occur. So I guess I'm unclear. Do we have all the deferred costs accounted for, or are there going to be more?
Yes. So I think what we were attempting to explain there is the actual fuel and purchase power cost itself is final, that to the best of our knowledge, unless there's some more results of lawsuits that would come in to help benefit our customers there, which we would of course pass that along. But we also knew that we had a legal proceeding to come into to this commission, and with that legal proceeding there are additional costs such as legal expenses. So we wanted to mention that depending on that that would get added, and if we needed to particularly call in perhaps the Utilicast individual that worked on that, if you all needed to answer or have him answer questions, it would have cost some additional money there. So we just were doing our best to indicate that there could be additional costs associated with that. And the side of it that as each month passes, as you mentioned earlier, there is additional carrying costs that's being added to that balance along the way. So we were just trying to be candid that there would be additional cost as each month progresses.
So you're saying beyond this proceeding, you'll have additional carrying costs, as he explicitly says in line 9. However, the company anticipates incurring additional carrying costs associated with procuring and purchasing natural gas and wholesale energy. That sentence, I don't understand. I understand like this hearing is going to cost the consumer, but how are you having additional procuring and purchasing natural gas and wholesale energy costs in the future related to Storm Uri?
So I can't for Mr. Rush, but I can and certainly try to explain it here. It's not that it's fuel and purchase power cost, it's the carrying cost on those particular
Oh,
expenses.
the carrying costs, but haven't all those been figured and added to the total?
Yes, but with the expectation that it would go through May. Again, the company doesn't have control of when we would start collecting on this. That would be at the discretion of the commission. So we were trying our best to say that we've estimated it through May when we thought that we would begin collecting. But, you know, if for whatever reason the docket lasted long. Oh, sorry. Can you?
You are freezing up a little bit, so that's why I'm stopping you. Okay, if you can repeat that again, maybe for Ms.
Oh,
Hoffman.
sure. I apologize for that. So I think what we were trying to say there, I'm not for sure where I got cut off, but what I was trying to say is that we had anticipated that these carrying costs and we would begin collecting in May, but we ultimately don't, as a company, have control over when the commission authorizes us to begin collection. So we were just estimating through May, but it could very well have lasted past May if the proceeding didn't allow for us to start that collection. Hopefully that helps explain it a little better.
Okay, are we the last of your dockets related to Storm Uri? Is Kansas the last one?
Yes, in a way, we are waiting on a commission, an appellate order in our Missouri jurisdiction. And then there's a prudency review taking place in Arkansas that starts in August of this year.
Okay, and as you were, as was being discussed with Commissioner Keene, 88% of your customers in Missouri, 3 to 4% in Arkansas. How many in Oklahoma? What percentage of your customer base? Or I did not hear.
It's about 3 or 4%.
Okay, and then doing the math, so then about 4% in Kansas, or 3 to 4%?
Yeah, about 4% roughly for Kansas as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. One more question related to going forward and your planning efforts. 2 winters have passed. And so did the company during 22 and 23 put into place, even though we haven't had this agreement, any protections that you would want to share with us now that will be part of the negotiations, the formal negotiations with staff?
Is that in respect to the hedging, or is okay.
Hedging and or protection of your facilities?
Yeah, Aaron, I'm not for sure if you would be best to.
I can answer that. Can you hear me okay, Chair Duffy?
Yes, I can.
One for the.
Okay. So yeah, in the Utilicast report, you know, we had them conduct it. It was important to us to not just give a review of our emergency preparedness, but also to ensure that you know, it gave us opportunities for continuous improvement. So some of the areas that they talked about, I'm happy to talk about implementing. In particular, load forecasting. We have been working to develop over the last couple of years additional load forecasting techniques. So we're leveraging multiple systems to try to better forecast our load and use that in implementation with the marketing efforts. We have a new, I'll call it strategy as far as relating to how we offer our units in when we have unknown gas prices. If you think back to Uri, the gas prices really went high on Friday for gas day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. But if you look at the LMPs associated with those days, it didn't hit until Sunday. And what that means is there's kind of a lag in. And what is pretty traditional for your offer is to use the prior day's gas daily spot price, because the new gas price doesn't really get finalized until later that evening. And so, Storm Elliott gave us an opportunity to kind of evaluate some of our different efforts. So we are constantly monitoring the ICE platform, which is the Intercontinental Exchange, to see what sort of indicative pricing there is for gas, to get that included into our offer before the 9:30 a.m. window close. It is an estimate and is not the true spot price, but it is better than having a prior day gas price to the extent it ends up trading differently. So we were able to implement that for Storm Elliott. As far as generation operations, there has been additional weatherization efforts put into the fleet, both from required or from the NERC perspective, winterization efforts. I think they actually are to be implemented by April of 23 for the upcoming winter. We implemented some of those, as many of those in advance. And I think additionally in the Utilicast report was to standardize the winterization processes within the plants. Their assessment was that all the winterization efforts were prudent and reasonable, but that it would maybe be easier to understand these if they were standardized. And so that effort has already been completed as well, to go through standardization process on your winter weatherization plans for each of the different operating plants. And then I'd already mentioned about what our changes and our continued efforts have been for improvement on hedge quantities, continued fueling up of the oil tanks, more percentages of natural gas procured ahead of time, and evaluation of storage options, and understanding with natural gas consultants as far as what the technicals and fundamentals are kind of saying about the future of gas.
Thank you. And Mr. Dahl, let me ask too, as it relates to, it seems like Uri and Elliott right around a holiday, and trading ceases over a holiday time period. Is there some rethinking on how that whole market works during a holiday?
For the gas market?
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's not something we're able to control. I know there is some work trying to be done on the gas market, but it's more in relation to some of the contract language, what NASB's able to your contracts you have with your counterparties for NASB requirements, what kind of force majeure declarations you can have in it to try to ensure a firmer fuel supply. I've not heard anything come through as far as additional trading through weekends or holidays. I will say you are 100% correct that they both happen to be over holidays where you had extended time frames where you were securing prices. Candidly, my belief was if we just planned for Uri 2.0, we were going to probably miss the mark. It was going to be something different, a cyber attack, a earthquake, something. And I'll be darned if it wasn't pretty close to Uri 2.0. So it did give us a chance to assess how we were able to continually improve from the prior storm. But yeah, it was very similar, and I don't know anything in particular as far as decoupling weekends or holidays from gas trading.
Okay, and one more question from me. As it relates to SPP, do you believe your voice was heard regarding Storm Uri? And generally, as you are a member of the SPP and in several states that are members, but you are a smaller utility, do you believe your voice is heard and recognized?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Uri impacted the entire membership. We all had a lot of challenges. I'm not sure anybody came out of that storm any worse than anybody else. Particularly, there may be some specific examples where some had a little bit better performance or some had slight differences. When it came to Elliott, though, we did have worse experiences than other entities. And I know this docket's about Uri, but you're asking about SPP, so I'm going to be honest. We had to do a minor load shed during Storm Elliott because of deliverability issues. And it is something that we have been very vocal about with SPP, the membership, the board of directors, the RSC, that the investments that SPP has made in the center of the system as they work their way out to the seams, we seem to have got to a stopping point on the seam and have not kind of finished the job. And that's really where we reside. So I'll say, just to answer your question, TBD. We're working. If the 2024 ITP comes through in a particular way and we're able to see some resiliency in our area, then yes, I believe that our voice is heard. But those votes are still going through the working group process.
I appreciate that. We don't have an occasion to talk very often, and there are a lot of issues that impact you as much as any other utility in this state. And the fact that you're spread among several states that are in the SPP, I do appreciate your answer. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any other questions before I turn to redirect? Okay, Mr. Flaherty, redirect, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. First, for Mr. Dole, Chairman Duffy asked you some questions regarding how Kansas customers benefit from the generation fleet that is located in Missouri. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, I do.
And is it true that Empire, even though it operates in 4 states, is what is referred to as an integrated system, and that the entire generation fleet provides services to all of your customers in all of its states, regardless of whether or not that particular generation's located in one state?
That is correct.
And then, Ms. Emery, one question for you. Chair Duffy asked you a question, and I think she expressed some concern about the timing of this filing, and that the timing of filing may have had a negative impact with respect to the carrying charge rate. In looking at the settlement agreement, and I know for that period in between the time the charges were incurred to the point where you actually get to begin recovering these costs, there's not a specific carrying charge rate mentioned, but a dollar amount through, I guess, May 31st. But is it your understanding, and I think Mr. Grady refers to this in his testimony, that the carrying charge rate for that period before you actually get to start collecting is significantly less than the 5.71%?
Yes, that is correct.
And so customers, let's say the commission, it takes them longer than June 1st to get the order out, they would still be incurring that less expensive carrying charge rate than the 5.71% that'll be in effect going forward, correct?
Yes, I understand the pre-collection rate would be less. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Chair Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. Okay, we've been going for an hour and a half, and I suggest that at this time we take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll start with witness Patrick Gore from CURB. So we are off the record. 10 minutes. It is now, I have 10:30. We'll come back at 10:40. Thank you. Okay, everyone, it is 10:40. We are back on the record. Making sure, yes, Denise is here, everyone's here, great. Kirk, will you please call your witness?
Yes, I call Patrick Orr to the stand, please, to have him sworn in.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give and the matter now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, sir.
Could you please state your full name and business address for the record?
My name is Patrick N. Orr, O-R-R. I work for the Kansas Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board, better known as CURB. And our address is 1500 Southwest Arrowhead Road, Topeka, Kansas, 66604.
Are you the same Patrick Orr that caused to be filed 11 pages of testimony in support of the unanimous settlement agreement dated April 6th of 2023?
Yes, sir, I am.
Do you have any changes you would like to make to your testimony?
No, sir, I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions today, would your answers be the same or substantially the same as what is in your current testimony?
Yes, sir.
At this point, I'd move the testimony in support of unanimous settlement agreement of Patrick Orr be admitted and spread upon the record.
Any objections? Hearing none, it is admitted.
Thank you, and I tender this witness for examination by the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Lev. Good morning, Mr. Orr. I'm going to turn to Commissioner French. Do you have questions of this witness?
I don't believe I have any questions for Mr. Orr. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Keen, do you have questions of this witness?
I have no questions for Mr. Orr.
Thank you. Mr. Orr, I do have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So Empire retained Utilicast to conduct a third-party independent review of, or rather Liberty, of Liberty's fuel procurement operations, transmission, communication, everything all encompassing URI. I've never heard of Utilicast. Are you aware of them, or did you review the study, and do you believe the findings to be a good reflection, first of all, of the company has the gravitas to do this sort of study? Secondly, were the findings the findings were that the company acted in a relatively good way. Do you agree with that?
Commissioner Duffy, I do agree with that. Liberty Empire was able to hire Utilicast. I had not heard of the company before their testimony. But they do have the ability and they do have the technical knowledge to review their operations. As was stated, they reviewed their operating procedures, their continuity of operations planning, all aspects of their operations, and have concluded that they were on par, that they were above board in what they did.
Okay. As this is the last of the URI proceedings, and CURB has been a part of every one of those. And as you look at this agreement, CURB has signed on as a signator to the unanimous settlement. So that must mean that you believe that the 13-year additional charge that will be levied to residential customers is fair.
That CURB believes that the 13-year is fair?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am. I do believe that. CURB believes that is fair. It strikes a balance. Liberty Empire operates in a very economically disadvantaged portion of the state. And Curb advocates for the individual ratepayer, the small commercial business. That's our duty, which is what we work towards. And I believe that the 13-year strikes the balance between an affordable cost for most ratepayers in that area, or for ratepayers in that area, to the amount of money that they're going to have to pay. So yes, I believe it provides a balance between the costs that they will pay and the time frame.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have for you, Mr. Orr. Curb, redirect, Mr. Love.
Curb has no further questions for Mr. Orr.
Thank you. Mr. Orr, you may virtually step down.
Thank you.
All right. Next, it will be staff's turn, and staff, please call your witness.
Thank you. I would call Justin Grady, and he may have linked up through Tommy Connor's site. So
Yes, we see him.
Oh yeah. Good morning, everybody. Apparently, I am Tommy Connors this morning. Let's see if I can rename myself.
That's all right. I think we all know who you are, Justin.
Sorry about that.
just for the record, though, would you state your name?
Please, let me swear the witness first.
Okay, that's fine.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give and the matter now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Once again, Mr. Grady, would you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Justin T. Grady.
By whom are you employed?
I am employed by the Kansas Corporation Commission.
In that capacity, have you caused to be prepared in this docket direct testimony and testimony in support of the settlement agreement that's dated April 6th, 2023?
Yes.
Have you also caused to be attached to your testimony an exhibit?
Yes.
Which I think relates to it's JTG1, and it's the different recovery rates and scenarios, I believe.
Yes.
And having provided that brief introduction, with respect to your testimony, do you have any changes or corrections you might make?
No, not that I'm aware.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, I would ask that the pre-filed testimony of Justin T. Grady be spread upon the record, and his attached exhibit also be included in the record, and I ask that it be admitted as well.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Okay.
At this time, Your Honor, I would tender Mr. Grady for any questions that the commissioners might have.
Thank you. And we will start with Commissioner French.
Thank you. While I love having a conversation with Mr. Grady, I thought his testimony was pretty comprehensive as to why staff was in support of the settlement agreement. So I don't believe I have any questions for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. We'll turn to Commissioner Keen. Questions for the witness.
I totally concur with Commissioner French's assessment of your pre-filed testimony as well, Justin. However, I do have one question as a follow-on to the questions that I asked of the company's witnesses, and I'll just give you as much license to answer it in whatever way that you think you should see fit. I would like really for you to give us your assessment of the company's efforts to mitigate their natural gas costs from the time of Winter Storm Uri through the present time.
Thank you for that opportunity, Commissioner Keen. What the company faced during Winter Storm Uri was not all that different than what our major gas distribution utilities in the state faced. It was exacerbated in certain ways, given the fact that they are so entirely exposed to one interstate gas pipeline, right? They are connected. Their major source of gas comes directly off of Southern Star. And so, you know, given that this is our last Winter Storm Uri cost recovery docket, you know, we can look back and reflect and compare their financial exposure and experience to some of the other utilities. And, you know, what really helped your financial exposure during Winter Storm Uri was, I mean, several things, right? But it depends if you're an electric or a gas utility, but in general, diversification of sources of gas and geographical dispersion or diversification of different interstate gas pipelines really helped because obviously we had that huge spike in natural gas prices on the 4-day holiday weekend, but then everybody knows on the 17th, Southern Star was $629. Well, you know, some other pipelines that are relatively close in the area were only $250 or $230. And that obviously is an extraordinary amount, but you know, it's a third, right? It's a third. And so, I mean, you know, their geographical, their lack of geographical diversification and also their predominant reliance upon not solely natural gas, but they have significant exposure to natural gas generation all on one pipeline. And so, you know, hindsight is 2020. It would have been great if somebody, you know, if they could have, or we could have anticipated that this was possible in a pre-Winter Storm Uri world. We could have designed financial protections to protect against it. You know, when you just try to think back to a pre-Winter Storm Uri world, I'm not sure we would have been able to get any decision maker, any neutral group of decision makers to agree to pay for that, right? Because people would have said, you're crazy. You know, gas has never been higher than $35 an MCF. Why would it go to 600? But you know, what these guys faced is not that dissimilar from the natural gas utilities in that they had a hedging plan for 50% of the gas that they should have needed, that a regular winter would have required. And that gas was purchased for $2.52, right? I mean, the first of the month price. But then usage for that 12-day period of time was double what it should have been, what it was expected to be. And so, well, lo and behold, you're only hedged about 25%, you know. They have made some changes, definitely that you know, they haven't rested on their laurels. Aaron is very, you know, he's very good. Him and his team. You know, it's funny for being our smallest electric utility in the state, investor-owned utility. You know, like during Winter Storm Elliott, Aaron was the first utility I heard from. Called me directly to say, hey, I'm just telling you, we're seeing really weird things in the natural gas markets, right? So I talk to him all the time. He's really good. We have a really, really good open relationship, but you know, it's difficult. And just give you some, you know, some of the thinking. I mean, in the last couple of winters, they've made changes, right? So they didn't want to be as exposed going into the first winter or the second winter. So they purchased even more gas at the first of the month prices, right? That's the only thing you can do to avoid these kind of extreme impacts is to limit your exposure to the daily physical gas market. And so that's what they've tried to do. They've tried to lock down 60-70% of their gas in forward physicals, either fixed price or inside FERC monthly gas index. But of course, after Winter Storm Uri, everybody wanted to do that, right? Everybody wanted to get as much exposure to the monthly index and less exposure to the daily index. So what happened? The natural gas market responds, and suddenly gas is $6 or $7 a month on the first of the month index, that first February after Winter Storm Uri. But the average of the daily prices was like $2.50 or $3. So, I mean, and then that was even worse, right? That was even worse this winter. And so it's difficult, I mean, we have made a lot. I mean, we've spent a lot of time with a lot of different discussions with a lot of different counterparties in this state, pertaining to what kind of options are available for gas and electric utilities to take some of this risk off the table, to buy catastrophic, price protection insurance. And there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to talking with Aaron and his team about. Each of our 3 gas utilities have made major changes in their hedging programs, to the extent that a few of those utilities would be almost entirely insulated from a repeat of Winter Storm Uri. But let me just give you one more example of how difficult it is with an electric utility. So, with these gas utilities, some of these major changes that we've made, right? We've doubled the budget for hedging. We've switched to swaps and futures and forwards and fixed prices, things that we haven't done in this state for 20 years. We've done those things for like $10 a month per residential customer for a year. Okay. Well, if you think about with Empire, or any utility that uses natural gas to turn it into electricity, a $1 change in natural gas translates to $10 in wholesale energy costs, or a cent of retail energy costs, right? If you're a retail customer. So if these guys go out, just think about that. So if these guys go out and say, right now you can purchase catastrophic insurance you can purchase a contract that says, if the daily gas price gets above $50, I'll pay you, I'll make you whole to where you only pay $50. But the cost of that is over, let's just say it's over $1 an MCF, right? And so you can go purchase that. We can set up a program where they purchase that insurance for their customers this year. But if the cost of that is $1 an MCF, then that's going to increase residential customers' costs by 1 cent per kilowatt hour for this upcoming winter, and every winter that we continue that program, right? And it's more expensive than $1 an MCF. And so if you think about the cost of this Winter Storm Uri is 0.00573 per kilowatt hour. So it's half of that. So it's really, it's not easy when you can't predict when you're going to burn the natural gas. You can't predict when you're going to be exposed to the daily natural gas market at twice what you expected. Once the weather models come around and actually you look at it, you think, okay, now I think we are going to need, well, you can go out and you can try to, purchase fixed price gas at $8, $10, $12, $15. But, that's all going to, that's going to translate into like 15-cent electricity for your customers. So anyway, it is quite challenging for an electric utility to develop a hedging program that completely insulates itself from the daily physical gas market. It really is, and that's the reason why we don't have electric utility hedging programs in the state. And electric utility hedging programs generally are very uncommon in the country. Natural gas utilities, you can do it; it's easier. It's not perfect, but it's difficult. But I mean, you know, they've made some positive steps. I think there are additional steps that we can take, but unfortunately they're not free, right? I mean, and you know, customers are only going to accept so much of that. So it's a difficult balancing act for sure. Yeah, I think that's all the thoughts I have right now.
I appreciate that. That's very, very detailed, very holistic, and really very insightful. It provides perspective too, and that's very helpful too, Justin. One final question for me, more generic than even specific to this particular docket, but in your experience, and you've been around here for a while, have you seen a period where there's been more volatility in the natural gas market?
Definitely not in the 20 years that I've been. I've only been really focused on, I've been more focused than I ever wanted to be on natural gas since February 17th of 2021, right? But generally focused on it for, you know, pretty closely following it for 10 years. There's been nothing like this kind of volatility for 10 years. I don't know, even if you went back to that last time that prices spiked, you know, in the 2007, 2008 timeframe, I don't think they went up as quickly as they did, and I don't think they dropped as quickly as they did, right? I was in Oklahoma City last week on a training conference, and so I happened to pull up the daily gas price, daily spot price at the One Oak natural gas terminal in Tulsa. And it was 50 cents an MMBTU for Wednesday and Thursday. Right? And that's the hub that traded for $1,200 on February 18th during Winter Storm Uri, when we were back down to 44. And so it's just, you know, I mean, that kind of volatility is obviously crazy, but I mean, the other thing is daily right now, the daily gas price all across the middle part of the country is lower. It's lower than the lows we saw during COVID. It's, you know, so, but who knows? I mean, thankfully for customers, for natural gas customers, for instance, you know, that gas is being put in storage every single day for our customers, for natural gas customers. And, you know, and the other thing is it correspondingly, it lowers the price and the cost of that insurance for this upcoming winter. So, you know, customers just went through a very painful winter heating season, right? You know, and next winter will not be as bad, regardless of what happens between now and this winter, because we've taken those proactive steps and kind of moved a lot of things up to take advantage of where we are. But it's difficult. I mean, one more quick thing, if you think about it, like right now, go out and look at the future, the forward markets. You know, we could order Empire to procure all of its gas needs for this upcoming winter we could probably get that done for $5.50 or so an MMBTU, you know, something like that, right? 5 to 550, 450 to 550. But just think about if we're wrong, right? I mean, that avoids a winter storm Uri. But if gas is really like $2 to $3 all winter, then customers are paying like $20 a month more all winter instead of $5 a month more. So it's tough, you know. I mean, I think about it every single day. I know Aaron does as well. Those guys are really good. So anyway, there are some things that we can do, but it's really, really difficult to completely avoid another repeat of Winter Storm Uri. You know, the one last thing, the true differentiating factor with electric utilities, we talk a lot about gas utilities, the true differentiating factor for electric utilities in that storm is the ability to produce megawatts with a fuel source other than natural gas. If you can produce fuel, if you can produce electricity with a fuel source other than natural gas, whether that be wind or coal or fuel oil, it was a big deal. Empire, the actual number is confidential, but you guys have seen it. I mean, it's more than tens and tens of millions of dollars, right? Those units probably paid for themselves for the entire existing net plant value of them just during Winter Storm Uri. I mean, but you can't build coal plants in this country anymore. And even if you could, it takes 5 years. And so, but there are things you can do, right? They, not only them, but Evergy as well, and the other utilities have significantly increased their fuel oil storage. That was one of the biggest success stories in this particular case is, we pushed to get Evergy to increase their fuel oil capacity to 7 days. And they said, well, we have limitations. We'll try, but we're going to, we can do 4 to 5 right now and we'll evaluate. Well, Empire had 7 to 10 days of storage on site, right? That was a huge benefit for them and their customers. Absent Winter Storm Uri, we probably, and the fact we learned that those wind farms have the winter weather package, and they've got another windstorm. They've got another winter weather, real weather storm of Winter Storm Elliott, and the operating history of those wind farms during that. So, we've committed to have good faith discussions to talk about, the hedge value of those wind farms too. But at the end of the day, the only thing you can do to protect your exposure to extreme market prices like that is generate megawatts with something other than natural gas. Empire was able to, they incurred like $140 million worth of natural gas expense, right? Well, they were able to sell into the integrated marketplace and recover nearly all of those costs. But what does that leave you? It leaves you exposure to the integrated marketplace. And natural gas is the marginal fuel during extreme times like that. That's what's going to set the market price. So it's difficult. You need non-gas generation of some form, or you have to try to develop some sort of hedge insurance policy, catastrophic insurance, or have physical supply in place, advanced procured. And, no matter what you do, you're probably not going to be perfectly right. We try to take a portfolio approach and do the best we can. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That is another holistic overview as well. You prompted me into making an editorial comment. I can't keep myself from doing it. Because I think you've made a powerful argument here for having a balanced mix of baseload fuel sources. You have to have some dispatchables to go along with the intermittent. And I'll just leave it at that. I won't editorialize on that beyond that, but I think you've made a powerful case for me on that point. One other comment I'll have, and then I'll turn you over to others. I remember well the volatility that came with that 2007, 2008 adventure in the natural gas markets. I remember it very well. And the price of gas then reached what was thought to be just astronomical levels. And it was a fraction of what happened with the event of Winter Storm Uri. So I guess one lesson is that you never say never. And the other is you try to protect yourself the best you can through, again, I think this diversity of baseload fuel mixes. Thank you very much for your testimony and your responses to my questions, Justin. I have no further questions of this witness.
Thank you, Commissioner King. I can remember well 708 too. That really was the advent for really stepping up the development of wind in this state. We started it a little bit earlier, but I think it proved that the diversification was necessary and wind was a part of that. But it was a real painful time for people, as well as there are other things going on the economic horizon that you know, some of those are replicated in present day in terms of economic issues. So, yeah, but the costs were a fraction, I would agree. Good morning, Mr. Grady. I do have, following up on this, the OFO issue related to Southern Star and the appeal by the company at SPP and to get some relief, and yet it did not occur. We all get the issue with hospitals and state prisons and facilities like that need to continue to operate. Industry, not so sure there, but if you could reflect a little bit on their concern about not really being heard or responded to in a and being kind of the sole voice there at SPP on this issue.
Yeah, so it's definitely a tough issue. Their voice and their petition was at FERC, right? That was a FERC issue.
Oh, I'm sorry, at FERC, yes.
That's okay. I was just clarifying for the record, but it's, yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult issue. I definitely have sympathy for, and, you know, honestly, agree. Honestly, I mean, I agree with Empire's position in terms of they experienced severe pressure issues on a pipeline that they had firm gas and firm transportation for, that they could not burn, you know, and they did the right thing. When Southern Star called and SPP called, you know, there was extreme coordination, you know, SPP, Southern Star, and Empire during the peak of all of this, like Sunday night on the 15th. They're saying, hey, we need you guys to back off your units. And they did, you know, they did the right thing. They did the right thing for regional reliability, and ultimately somebody else consumed that gas. I think it's easy to say the person that consumed that gas should have been penalized for that gas, and then, you know, that could have went to Empire and would have made their customers whole. Unfortunately for Empire, you know, there were a lot of other customers and utilities that were on the other side of that said, look, these penalties are not going to be in the millions or the hundreds of millions of dollars. These are going to be penalties, you know, very, very, very large penalties that will put people out of business. And I don't know what working through that. I don't know what working through that procedure would have been like, or that proceeding, but because it was at FERC, I'm assuming that we wouldn't even be to the hearing phase at this point. I feel like that'd be a 4 or 5 year endeavor that would be very extensive and complicated and expensive. I mean, you know, we worked through something that was just a fraction of that, as you guys know, in the KGS proceeding. And I think at the end of the day, we came up with a solution that worked very well, which was basically to tie it back to the actual lost commodity costs and just make people whole without true penalties. You know, I don't know if FERC would have allowed for that sort of thing. Probably not, the way that, you know, it seems like they have a very strict adherence to the filed rate doctrine, especially recently. I don't know everything that went into. I never talked to Southern Star necessarily about what went into their request to waive the penalties. They probably thought that their structure would not allow them to go through the process that we went through to find the right answer. You know, I mean, we went through a process to find the right answer. It took us 6 months or whatever, and thousands of hours of work by everybody involved, right? And that was an extensive process. I just don't think you could get through a process like that at FERC, unfortunately. If you could, then we could have made, Empire whole. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but ultimately, I think, if you lined everybody up, all the utilities in the state, if you took if you took an anonymous poll, I think you'd probably have eight out of 10 utilities said, no, we had to waive those penalties. The alternative would have been disaster. So I don't know. That's probably not a perfect answer, but that's my genuine thoughts about it.
But as it relates to the SPP and the integrated marketplace and the additional costs that the company incurred, was that proportionate to the company's, how do I say this, size and relevancy?
Yeah. So, what Empire paid for electricity during that period of time is not that much different than what everybody else paid for electricity during that time. It was extraordinary, right? Up to $3,000 a megawatt hour. Higher than that. But on average, if you did the average, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it'd be very high. It'd be like $1,900 or $2,000 or maybe more per megawatt hour. So for electricity costs, they paid a transparent, readily understandable. Empire does its own shadow settlement, and they went through resettlement processes, and they got $10 million out of that, right? But what never has been solved, I don't think even to this day, I don't think there's even major changes underway in the IRATF to solve this. I don't know if it will ever be solved or not, but for both Empire and Sunflower, right? If you recall back to Southern Pioneer had significant unburned natural gas costs as well. And from what I've been told and the way I understand it works is the market monitor at SPP, and it comes back to the tariffs themselves, and it comes back to the structure of the market at FERC is if you don't use that natural gas to turn it into megawatts, we can't pay you for it. If it's not megawatt hours, we're an electricity market, that's just, and so that's unfortunate. There are some changes we can make, like for instance, there's a proceeding that's actually was just filed here, but there are like the KGS proceedings. I won't go into the specifics of it, but it's public knowledge. There are some changes you can make to the transportation tariffs that can allow on an intrastate basis, customers to say trade their imbalances, and there are some things that you can do to try to help make it a little bit easier for electric utilities that do the right thing and advance procure natural gas, and then ultimately they don't end up being dispatched by the integrated marketplace. But at the federal level, I don't think those changes are really being pursued or discussed much. And I know that there's still work to do at the IRATF. There are still forums that are occurring right now, right? The NASB Gas Electric Coordination Forum is still occurring, and there's still discussions there. So maybe there is hope, but on the other hand, there are all the electric customers out there that other electric customers that say, I don't want to pay for your unburned natural gas. That's a risk that the company takes. So I don't know. It's not necessarily a straightforward question, but it's definitely something I think deserves continued discussion, because it's difficult. And that's what all the coordination of the gas and electric and syncing up the gas and electric days and all that is about, because heading into that weekend, people made the decision to support reliability, and they lined up maximum gas production for each of their units for all 4 days because that's what regional reliability called for. And then SPP didn't dispatch those units full out for all 4 days. And if you ask them, they'll say, well, that's because there were cheaper megawatts available and electricity was already $3,000 a megawatt hour. You know, and then for Empire, they had the gas, they had the dispatch orders, but the pipeline wouldn't support their ability to burn full out. So I don't know. They're definitely difficult issues. Everybody's aware of them. I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if SPP did make that change, if they could get that approved by FERC, because that is a nationwide issue where if you don't turn that gas into megawatt hours, you don't get compensated for it. At least that's my understanding.
I appreciate you expanding on that because while I do believe there is a lot of room for FERC to be involved in our lives, I do think there are some instances where perhaps their involvement is should be ceded back to the states in some ways or for particular instances. Okay, let me turn to a different subject, Utilicast. As I said to Mr. Orr, I've not heard of them. However, they were the third party that was hired to do an independent review. Could you shed more light on Utilicast? And I guess I didn't ask Mr. Orr this, but I'm assuming Utilicast did a look-see at all of Liberty Empire's holdings here. And what is your reaction to their findings?
So Utilicast is a consulting company that I'm aware of. I mean, we've heard of them for years. They don't tend to do a lot of business in Kansas. I don't know why. You know, it's probably just for whatever reason, historical relationships have been developed with other consulting firms. But I was very, very impressed with the depth and comprehension. I want to say comprehensiveness. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but how comprehensive the report was, right? I mean, I really was. That was really, really good work. And you know, they relied on a lot of the discovery that we issued in this docket and CURG. And so I thought it was really good. There's no doubt that they have the technical knowledge and capability to put that together. You know, had they not done such a comprehensive job in that report, we probably would have done something similar to that. I mean, that's what we did in the Evergy docket, you know, and I know that, I mean, having been involved in the compilation of that report, Chad Unrein primarily put that together, but then I was involved for about a month, very extensively. It's an incredible amount of work that goes into putting a report together like that. So I'd love to know how many people they had assigned to that, and or if that was one or two individuals that put that together, then they are national caliber talent type individuals, right? That was a really comprehensive report. And you know, you read it and it gives you a true sense of the difficulty that company faced in terms of, you know, managing through. It's not just the pipeline pressure issues, but it's the cut notices. You know, like, and I've discussed this with Aaron before, but these cut notices come in during the day from Southern Star, and they basically say, hey, we realize that you have firm gas that's supposed to be on the pipeline, but actually, it's not going to be there. Sorry. And they'll give you these notifications like 6-7 times a day. Well, you're required under the operational flow order to maintain, to burn exactly the same amount of gas every hour of the day for as long as that OFO goes on. And in the morning, they tell you, well, your gas didn't show up. So you back your unit off, right? Well, at an exactly level consumption of gas. And then the evening cycle, 4 or 5 cycles in, they restore the cut and they say, well, never mind, your gas is there. Well, okay, well, now you bump your production back up to your economic maximum and you do it for the rest of the day. But lo and behold, you didn't burn all that gas that day, even though you might have been dispatched and could have sold it into the market for $4,000 or $5,000 a megawatt hour. So it's just, you know, it really was a very, very difficult, issue that it was a very, very difficult set of circumstances that they were faced with during that period of time. And, Utilicast, obviously Empire was paying for the report. So there's always that question, right? How independent was it? They had some pretty tough observations and recommendations, and we followed up on through discovery, as did Curb with Empire, in terms of whether they were following up with those recommendations, and they are, right? They're taking the actions that were recommended by Utilicast. I think it was a really, really good report.
Thank you. Justin, this does conclude the last of the URI related dockets. Have you been made aware of any, we did hear a blip from the Attorney General's office, 3 weeks, a month ago. And there was a news story, but are you aware of any other activity or from the Attorney General's office as it relates to their investigation into Storm Uri?
No, what I heard last was, I think what everybody else heard, which was that suit was filed pertaining to Gas Day 17 and the activity that led up to the pricing of Gas Day 17. I don't know what the extent would be or what the requested relief would be, but for instance, if that price was just dropped to, say, what the price was over the weekend, then there would be tens of millions of dollars of relief for utilities all across Kansas, right? Everybody bought a lot of gas on Gas Day 17 that was priced very, very high. Empire included, right? But that's the last thing I've heard. I know that, I know that other states are aware of that action. I was at an accounting regulatory conference last week, and it was in Oklahoma, and it was discussed, sort of frequently. So people are aware of it, and I don't know if it will potentially spur additional action by other states' attorneys general or not, or if there's more to come in terms of other days, during the month or other activity. And then, we haven't heard anything at all from FERC, right? And that's typical. In terms of I would say it's typical at the Attorney General's office too, that we haven't heard. Those are, I think it's accurate to say those are criminal investigations, right? So it's a pretty limited subset of people that are communicated with during those. And FERC has just an outright policy that they don't provide updates one way or the other on their pending market manipulation investigations. You literally learn about those the day that the report's filed. And then, you know, a lot of that is not publicly available either. So, but that's all I've heard. That's all I'm aware of.
Okay. That concludes my questions. I look around for the commission. Did Commissioner French, you have a follow-up question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Justin, you had a lot to say, and it was all interesting, but one thing particularly caught my interest. And I'm gonna make a comment and try to turn it into a question that might elicit additional comments to you. I was particularly struck in your discussion about how you and Liberty are beginning to look at gas hedging, and your discussion of, you know, what the magnitude of cost for an electric utility to engage in a really robust gas hedging program is. And frankly, it surprised me. It caught me off guard. I mean, I think you were talking about it could add as much as 1 cent or 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which would be a pretty big rate increase. And, you know, when you're talking about that amount of dollars, you know, that could be used to build a lot of infrastructure, new generation, new transmission. And I guess the thought that crossed my mind is, and I'm sure this is the conversation that you'll have to have with Liberty, and the conversation they'll probably have to have within integrated resource planning is, you know, do you hedge natural gas, or do you build other generation types, wind, solar, storage, as a hedge? Do you try to improve interregional planning and your, you know, connections with your neighbors and access to other energy markets? Are those dollars better served, you know, hedging energy prices in that way, rather than just making your gas supply really robust? So, okay, that's my comment. I guess my question would be, am I way off base? Are those some thoughts that have entered your mind? Are those things you plan to talk to Liberty about?
Those are great comments. You know, really, I mean, I should probably say my example. So my example was based on 100% gas generation and translating into, you know, the cost of electricity, right? So, but Empire's exposure, you know, Empire's portfolio is at least 50%, right? So let's just say it's 50%. Well, if you're wrong by $1 per MMBTU, you overpay by $1 per MMBTU, and 50%, and you use that to produce 50% of your generation, then everything in my example before is correct, but only, you know, it's half of what it was, right? So but still, then that's half of a cent, you know, per kilowatt hour, and roughly $5 a month impact for a residential customer. And so, I mean, that's the same amount of impact that we're talking about here over 13 years. So if you're off $1, you know, a year, every year for 13 years, then yeah, I mean, it is an interesting, when you think about that and you think about how impactful it can be, I'm sure that Empire's integrated resource planning discussions and analysis and modeling, as have every other utility in the Midwest. I mean, I'm sure that all of that's been almost turned on its head, or, you know, major changes or major assumption changes or estimating, forecasting changes have went into all of that based on what's happened in the last 18 months, right? I mean, what's happened in the last 18 months in natural gas prices, it's, I don't know, if you can envision a world, I mean, the problem is, what's the future, right? Is is natural gas, are we now back to a new normal? We're going to have this for 10 years again, like we did in the last 10 years? Or, I mean, if you look at the pipeline of additional LNG facilities that are scheduled to be built over the next 3, 4, 5 years, it's a real question as to whether our domestic production is going to keep up with that level of export, right? And so I don't know, you're right that if natural gas prices are not going to be low and stable for the next 10 years, and you are exposed and either by virtue of the fact that you are producing megawatts with natural gas, or you're buying that power off of the market, which is generally really closely tied to and connected to the natural gas price, then that makes a major difference in your resource planning decisions, right? You can build a lot of transmission. You can afford to build a lot of non-gas generation. If your view of the world suggests that gas is going to be high or very volatile in the future, I mean, and because if natural gas was going to be $10, and we all knew it was going to be $10 for the next 10 years, then we're not retiring any coal plants all the way through their life, and we're going to do everything we can to keep them. We're also every wind and solar project in the pipeline suddenly makes way more sense, right? Because it's all about avoiding exposure to market prices and or natural gas, turning natural gas into electricity. And none of this is meant to demonize natural gas, right? It's if we didn't have it and it wasn't, if Empire didn't do what they did and buy that natural gas and use it to turn into megawatts, without it, during Winter Storm Uri, we literally would have had the same impact as Texas, right? Maybe worse, right? And you guys know this. It's just that when it goes through periods like we've experienced in the last 18 months, it turns into extreme electricity price shocks. We were very fortunate in most parts of the state. But Empire this summer, Aaron could probably tell you, I mean, they had some 7 and 8 cent ECAs this summer, right? I mean, it's incredible. I mean, we're talking $70, $80 a month impact for residential customers. And they weren't alone. Anybody that was exposed to the market or that used natural gas to produce electricity had those kind of impacts. In the Northeast, I mean, you guys have seen some of the extreme examples. I mean, we're talking about 20 cent ECAs, 25 cent ECAs. It was crazy. So anyway, that's all pretty raw, unstructured thought process. But I'm sure they think about it. They think about it every single day. I mean, I don't know. It's a great point, but it really does. It probably leads to why it doesn't make sense for this utility to incur $2 or $3 in MMBTU for catastrophic risk insurance to protect its winter gas purchases. It probably just does not make sense for an electric utility.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was getting at. Similar to your comment, I was certainly not denigrating the value of natural gas generation within the fuel stack at all. It was merely, well, what makes sense as the value to hedge your exposure to natural gas? And is it further price certainty on your natural gas, or is it other alternatives, alternative generation or transmission sources? So that was a really thoughtful response. I appreciate it.
Is that all you had, Commissioner French? Yes. And your comments are well said, but if you can't get your gas to your source, all the hedging programs aren't gonna work?
Well, you can. I mean, the thing is, so there are physical hedging options, and then there are purely financial hedging options, right? And there's ways to hedge natural gas market volatility where you don't ever have to have an MCF of gas delivered, right? I mean, because the megawatts are going to continue to flow as long as they're available through the integrated marketplace. So there are ways that you could hedge your exposure to the integrated marketplace. You could do forward purchases of energy. You can do swaps. You can do financial options that say, whether we take any delivery of the gas or not, if the price goes above $5 an MCF, you pay me, right? So there are ways to develop it. It's just that there's a cost to it, you know? And so you got to be careful based on everything we've been talking about. It's a really tough balancing act. I mean, we've had discussions with Evergy as well about the establishment of a hedging program in Kansas. You know, it's just, the last time we had those discussions were, you know, it's 10, 15 years ago, and it's not easy, right? There's a reason very, very few electric utilities hedge. It's tough. It's tough to do it right, but.
Thank you. Commissioner Keen, you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Both.
Okay, please.
Why hold back? Yeah, I'll start with the comment and I'll kind of work into the question, Justin. With respect to Winter Storm Uri, and I think in terms of the day-to-day responsibility for coordinating the utilization of all these different baseload fuel types through all the different seasonal challenges that arise, the laboring or if you will, I think the primary responsibility for coordinating all of this ultimately rests with the Southwest Power Pool in our case, because they're our grid operator. One concern that I have is how effectively the Southwest Power Pool is addressing how it can improve performance in this coordinating function, especially in balancing the various baseload fuel sources to assure reliability and resilience. So my question really is, isn't it true that if we move too quickly away from the availability of these dispatchable resources beyond price, the real risk is reliability and resilience?
Yeah, there's no question about that. No question, right? I mean, even if you look at, and you know, all of the focus of resource adequacy, both by this commission and the SPP, the discussion is going on in ERCOT right now. It's going on in MISO. It's going on in SPP. I mean, all of the very, very tight days that occurred last summer, when it just so happens to be that, you know, we don't have a lot of solar in SPP right now, and there are some days that the wind doesn't blow. And I mean, they missed you guys remember the extreme load scenario that was in the NERC reliability assessment for the summer in SPP ended up being like a couple gigawatts low of what their actual peak was, right? So and you know, there were very high electric bills in Kansas last year, and in a lot of other places in the SPP, in part because natural gas was $8 or $9, and in part because we were using that gas to produce electricity during that period of time. But it was definitely worth it, right? It was definitely worth it. I mean, if we had done, and I know there are going to be, you know, more robust analytical estimates of what is the value of lost load. But if we had lost load for 8 hours once or twice, I'm certain that what we paid for that natural gas to produce that electricity was well worth it, right? It was way better than losing load for a couple of times during the hottest days of the summer. So yeah, there's no question. I certainly didn't mean all of my discussion earlier was just purely financial and economics and looking for ways to, looking for ways to optimize and lower customers' exposure to those market prices. But all of that comes secondary to reliability and keeping the lights on for sure.
Okay. No, I didn't mistake the direction you were headed in, nor did I dispute it seriously. I just think more holistically, we kind of need to look at really all of the attributes that these various baseload fuels bring to the table. And before we throw them over under the bus or over the side of the boat, I think we ought to maybe have some second thoughts. Thank you very much, Justin. That's my question.
One more quick response, just while we're having a conversation. I know there are people that are in the industry that are I don't know, pessimistic or really, really worried about the direction we're going in the next 2 or 3 years with regard to reliability. And it is going to be a challenging time. But, my boss and I, Jeff and I, 2 years ago, were really worried because nobody was having these conversations, right? And everything was moving forward. We hadn't had Uri, we hadn't had some of the resource scares that we had in California and Texas. And it was just, we had an application filed here to retire a coal plant and to replace it with solar. And I'm not saying that someday that won't come back up, but those discussions have been put on hold, right? The last year has been, it's like the year of reliability. It's regulators are, everybody is waking up and realizing that we need to make sure the pace of this whole transition is correct. And, we've had our resource adequacy workshops, which have been well attended, and that's getting, people are taking notice. And so I was at that conference last week. A good portion, a lot of the discussion was we as regulators need to be open to new ideas and new concepts. Perhaps, seasonal layup, seasonal cycling of these coal units, just because you see the capacity factor going down to 25 or 35%, don't be quick to jump on the idea that, that's not used and useful. Because no, it is extremely useful during Winter Storm Elliott or during Winter Storm Uri, but if the wind's blowing or the sun's shining, well, yeah, back it off. So those are the kind of messages that I think are finally resonating. And I don't know, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. There's more focus and more attention being placed on resource adequacy and reliability in the last 18 months than probably the previous 10 years. So that's gotta be a positive. That's some indication that it's starting to sink in. People are taking it seriously. I think they are.
I think diversity is a key. I think maintaining some diversity is a big key to providing for reliability and resilience. Thank you very much for those observations. That concludes my questions for Justin.
Thank you. Justin, I would add too, I do think there's a greater awareness and appreciation for going to that basic of reliability. I think if anything, in the last few years, what we've seen, even with the public, they understand how precarious we are individually and susceptible to COVID, to storms, extreme weather conditions, to extreme conditions in this country, throughout the world, and how it's like a Jenga game, and it is interrelated. We are global, and yet we are so local. so many things are built upon each other, and we can't have those isolated discussions. They really are woven all together in the fabric of our individual communities and our collective communities. And I know this is me just waxing, but we're brought back to reality time and again with things that have occurred in this country and throughout the world. And the utilities and the product they produce is a large part of it. So that said, I do know that you and your Jeff and you and the rest of the staff made extreme commitments to seeing all these dockets through in a very short time frame, and with limited staff and with COVID and all the other challenges that were going on. And I will say that I'm very proud to be associated with this commission, and how from the first day when you, Commissioner French, were chair, standing there next to the governor saying, we will do our part. We will see this through. We will investigate. We will study. We will make sure that the result to the ratepayer, to the customer, is fair. And I think we have done that. And it's something, Justin, you and Jeff and the rest of the folks should be very proud of, because it was difficult. This was something that was not on your agenda, not on your schedule, and yet you were able to get it done and do it well. And I think for that we're very proud of you and what you have accomplished. So we owe the staff a deep debt of gratitude, as well as all staffs throughout the United States that had to deal with this issue. Staff redirect.
No redirect. I think we've covered everything.
I think we have to. Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Mr. Grady, you may virtually step down. Thank you. Folks, this concludes our hearing in docket number 21 EPDE 330 GIE. As a reminder, the parties have waived post-hearing briefs, so a commission order is due in this matter on May 3rd, 2023. Video of this hearing is available on the Commission's YouTube channel, which can be accessed through a link on the Commission's homepage. And I'm looking at the commissioners. If there are no further matters, we will close the record and adjourn. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Be well, do good, be good.